It has emerged that the 14% tariff recently imposed on Nigeria by the United States President Donald Trump was mainly against Nigeria's import ban on 25 different product categories, which had impacted U.S. exporters. The Office of the United States Trade Representative had noted that the ban, particularly in agriculture, pharmaceuticals, beverages, and consumer goods, negatively impacted U.S. trade balance with Nigeria. The U.S. office condemned Nigeria's restrictions on beef, pork, poultry, fruit, juices, medication, and spirits, a development which limited U.S. market access and reduced export opportunities. We're now joined by Managing Director, Cowrie Asset Management Limited, Johnson Chukwu, to discuss the effects of the Trump's 14% tariff on Nigeria's export, how the federal government should respond, and the likely impact on the Nigerian economy. Good afternoon, Mr. Chukwu. Many thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, Cynthia. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you as always. Now, can you assess the real cost in terms of what we have to pay as a country based on this proposed 14% tariff? Some of the unforeseen costs that we might not be highlighting at the moment.
Okay, to do that, you have to first look at what we export to the U.S. The major things we export to the U.S. are food items, other than our crude oil exports and liquefied natural gas. Of course, the U.S. is not a net exporter of liquefied natural gas. So we largely export crude to the U.S. Crude is exempted from the U.S. Donald Trump's tariff policy. Then the other products we export are largely food items. Items like yam, gare, items like all the food items, vegetables that Nigerians eat in U.S. And then we have some exports related to our made textile items, fully made textile items like our agbada, our kaftan. Those are the major exports we export, major products we export to the U.S. So the tariff, the 14% tariff, will be largely on those food items and those fully made textile items, because there's no tariff on oil and energy products. So how will this affect Nigeria? If you look at our total export, you realize that food items account for less than 2% of our total export. And the U.S., as a share of Nigeria's export commodity, if you exclude crude oil, it's inconsequential, it's insignificant. So in terms of cost to the economy, I don't think it's going to be material as it relates to the duties imposed on those items that are exported to the U.S. Unless if the duties are extended to cover oil or energy items, that's when we begin to hurt. In terms of import, Nigeria is not increasing its duties on import from the U.S. So in terms of Nigerians who import products from the U.S., we are not going to have any direct impact on that. But of course, a trade war will have overall impact on global economy. There are areas it will affect the Nigerian economy, not necessarily based on the tariff, but based on the impact on crude oil prices. And anything that affects crude oil prices affects our reserve, affect our foreign exchange, and affect our reserve. Whatever affects our reserve will affect our exchange rate, and the transmission effect of exchange rate movement will be on inflation rate. And inflation will affect standard of living of Nigerians. So those are the ways, like you call it, the hidden ways you could affect, the trade war will affect Nigeria from the larger impact on the global economy.
Very good, Mr. Chukwu. Now, we've seen how China and Europe, and of course other countries, are stiffening positioned when it comes to retaliatory options against President Trump's tariffs. And of course, does Nigeria have the capacity to adopt that option as well, especially if it goes beyond the 14% and it filters down to the oil aspect of the trade we have with the U.S., as you alluded to earlier?
You know, when it comes to international trade, we don't have a strong comparative advantage. I did not see Nigeria standing up to U.S. Just the way the Chinese are doing. The Chinese economy is multiple times. It's about $17 trillion, depending on which year you use to measure it, $15 to $17 trillion. So you can't compare that to the Nigerian economy that is less than 300 million billion. So Nigeria does not have that impact. But even if you look at the impact of US trade between Nigeria and US, total import from US accounted for about 6.36% of total import in the last quarter of last year. So as a share of Nigeria's international trade, US accounts for less than 3% of the international trade. So US can actually be taken out of Nigeria's international trade and they will relatively survive with minimal scratch. But I keep emphasizing is that does not mean that we are not going to be affected, because whatever happens to the two biggest economies will affect us. But as for Nigeria saying they want to retaliate with tariffs, I do not see Nigeria there's no compelling need for that, because they are no longer our major trading partner. Our major trading partner today is China, India, Netherlands, Spain. So in terms of ranking, US no longer rank among the top trading partners of Nigeria, like what it used to be maybe 10, 20 years ago.
All right, well said, Mr. Chukwu. Now, what lessons, though, can Nigeria learn from other developing economies that successfully navigated similar US tariff increases?
A couple of things, Cynthia. One is what is happening between India and Vietnam. If you look at the tariff, the US imposed about 47% tariff on Vietnam, and imposed about 24% tariff on India. And what is happening is that manufacturers are beginning to imagine that they can easily, particularly for light industries, they can easily pivot to India and manufacture in India and export to the US market at lower tariff. And that's why Vietnam is responding by trying to remove all duties on US goods, imports. And that's a lesson for Nigeria. Why is that happening? Because these two countries have the capacity to ratchet up production activities. Unfortunately for us, we do not have that capacity. Assuming Nigeria has capacity, like you said, what can we learn from other emerging economies? Assuming we have a cost-efficient manufacturing base, with a 14% tariff, you would have seen manufacturers move to Nigeria, because at that rate, you can easily export to the US, and your export will be far more competitive than what other countries are exporting to US, because we have a huge labor market in terms of the number of our population, in terms of the demography of the population. We are mostly, average age of Nigerians is about in the region of 18 years. So in terms of the labor supply that will fuel or will support a manufacturing economy, we have that. But we do not have other supporting infrastructure. If we had that, if we can build the infrastructure to support manufacturing, then we would have been in the same position that like Vietnam and India that are trying to compete for US export market, given this tariff war. Those are the countries that will benefit from the tariff war.
Very good, Mr. Chukwu. Now, Nigeria over time has recorded balance of trade deficits with countries like the US, Western countries, and others as well to a large extent, due to the challenges, as you also mentioned, of the manufacturing sector not living up to expectations sometimes, especially when it comes to competitiveness in this regard. So this tariff, how will it affect our manufacturing base? Will there be some kind of renewed efforts to be more competitive, especially for the global market, as it were, depending on goods we have comparative advantage over others, as it were?
Well, unfortunately for us as a country, the structures you need to put in place to be a manufacturing base are not there. We don't have efficient and cost-effective power supply. We do not have cost-effective and efficient transport system. We do not even have the logistic infrastructure, the seaport that can ensure that you easily export goods at minimal cost. We do not have the regulatory environment that will support efficient manufacturing. We have multiple taxes. These are some of the constraints that cannot be lifted overnight. But like they say that the best time to plant the tree was 10 years ago, but the next best time is now. We probably should see this as an opportunity to start that process of building an economy that is manufacturing, that is cost efficient in terms of manufacturing. And what do we need to do? address the issue of energy supply, power supply, address the issue of infrastructure supply, address the issue of logistics supply. The seaports must be efficient in terms of bringing in goods and taking out goods out of the country. That's important, exporting goods out of the country. Look at our tax system, harmonize the tax system and make it very efficient and cost-effective to pay taxes. Look at our regulatory environment, our customs, customs and excise duty management. When you do these things, you will now build an economy that we can produce whatever is produced elsewhere in the world at costs that are comparative to what is produced elsewhere in the world. It's only when we do that that we can begin to take advantage of situations like this. So this may be for us as a clarion call. In terms of our manufacturing sector, today we do not have a strong manufacturing sector that is cost efficient. Our manufacturing sector accounts for about 8% of our total GDP, but in terms of efficiency, I do not know of any product that is manufactured cheaper in Nigeria than manufactured maybe in China or any other manufacturing base of the world, or Vietnam. So that's where the constraint is. But like I said, we can start now to lift those limiting factors that have made our manufacturing sector not to be competitive.
Absolutely. Thank you for your robust analysis, as always. Mr. Johnson Chukwu, Managing Director, Kari Asset Management. It's been a pleasure having you here on Newsday. Thank you for joining us.